All right, let's get into this. Today we are talking about the Santa Cruz 5010 and the Ibis Mojo 4. This showdown couldn't not happen. These bikes are too similar. The intended audience and the intended application are kind of the same. Geometry is very similar. Travel numbers are identical, but the way these two bikes ride is totally different on trail. One feels really quick, nimble, lively, jibby, fun, and the other feels a lot bigger and burlier. So stick around to see which one's which. Okay, so we're going to start with a quick overview of each bike, starting with the Santa Cruz 5010. Obviously 27.5-inch wheels, 130 millimeters of rear travel, 140 millimeters of front travel. Components on the build I rode was an XT build kit with the upgraded Santa Cruz Reserve carbon wheels. So RockShox Pike up front, deluxe in the rear to handle the 130 millimeters of rear travel, XT drivetrain and brakes, RockShox reverb dropper. Pretty solid kit. Retail on that $7,200, so getting a little spendy. But yeah, jumping into the Ibis Mojo now. Still 27.5-inch wheels, 130 millimeters of rear travel, 140 front. Still an XT build kit, and this time we did upgrade to the Ibis carbon wheels with the Ibis branded hubs. So Fox 34 up front does have that new Grip 2 damper, which is really good in the 34. I think it makes more of a difference in the 34 than it does in the 36. And then it has a Fox DPS for the rear travel. XT drivetrain, XT brakes, and curiously this one comes with Maxxis Assegai tires, which kind of don't really fit the application super well, but you know, this bike climbs well enough, may as well. Retail on this kit is $6,900, so a little bit less than the Santa Cruz for pretty much the same level of components. So now jumping into just a quick summary of each bike, or a quick mini review of each bike, and then we'll dive into the comparison. The 5010, it's Santa Cruz's kind of play bike, fun size wheel bike, short travel, small wheels, made for having the most fun. It's not made to be the fastest or the burliest, although it is plenty burly and plenty fast, but this one's more about having fun. It uses Santa Cruz's new lower link VPP, which all of their bikes now, except for the Blur, have the same thing. And they all kind of have this similar feel to them, and I think it's because of that suspension platform. The lower link kind of sits a little deeper into its travel, provides a ton of traction, and it's a pretty active feeling suspension. And it rides deeper and bigger than it actually is. It's not the most efficient or the fastest on the climbs. Does well enough, you know, don't have too many complaints, but there are kind of more energetic and more lively feeling suspension platforms out there. Where it really shines is in technical climbing. The added traction of that VPP suspension just makes it hard to spin out. You can stand up and the rear wheel stays glued to the ground. So in technical, tough climbing, the 5010 is really good. And then downhill, the 5010 feels really burly. It's got a stiff, stout frame, and you've got that RockShox Pike on there with the 35 millimeter stanchions. So I think it's a little bit on the stiffer side. I kept forgetting I was on a short 130 mil travel bike. You can ride this thing kind of on more difficult and more technical terrain than you'd think. The front end on this bike feels tall. It's only, 4 millimeters taller than the Ibis, but it does feel pretty tall, which is great for steep downhills. It keeps your body weight up, so you're not going to go over the front of the bike. On corners and things, I did have to make a conscious effort to keep that front wheel weighted, or it would tend to get a little washy. Not a huge deal, and you should keep the front wheel weighted anyway in corners. So this bike just reminds you that you need to do that. Pros of the Santa Cruz 5010, you've got traction for days, endless traction, a deep suspension feel, and a really stout frame. The cons are, for a 130 mil travel bike, it doesn't climb as energetically as you'd think, and it's a little bit heavy for a 130 mil travel bike. Let's jump into a really quick review of the Ibis Mojo 4. Like the Santa Cruz, it is Ibis's kind of short travel trail bike made for having fun. Again, it's not supposed to be the fastest. It's not a race bike for XC or Enduro or anything. It's just a trail bike with small wheels. So 130 millimeters of rear travel, 140 front, and it feels like that. It doesn't feel bigger. It doesn't feel smaller. It feels exactly like it is. It feels quick, really lively, really fun to ride. It's great for turning every roller into a jump. It's great for just slamming into berms. It's really good for dipping in and out of corners, kind of Star Warsing through trees. Really fun bike. The DW Link suspension on this thing is top tier, especially when it comes to climbing. I've said this with every Ibis bike I've ever ridden. I don't think there's a more energetic, lively, faster accelerating climbing platform than DW Link on Ibis bikes. There's just something special to it. Hit the pedals and the bike just is gone. Even with those Maxxis Assegai tires, this bike just climbs really fast. I can't imagine how fast this thing would be with better suited tires for the application. The DW Link is really good at smoothing out all the small bumps, uphill and downhill. So climbing all the little rocks and roots, this bike is just super smooth and it makes it easy to keep the pedals turning. Downhill in the little stuff, it's incredible. You don't really feel any of the small stuff. It just kind of pitter-patters over the top of all of it. The Mojo's frame is not the stiffest. Also, it runs the Fox 34, which I think isn't quite as stiff as a Pike. So it's not great for monster trucking. Small to medium-sized bumps, it's great. Large stuff, you're going to have to go a little slower and pick smoother lines. You're not just going to be able to plow through everything. So pros for the Mojo. We've got a really, really lively suspension feel. We've got a lightweight build, and it's an impressive climber. Only con I can really think of is it's not the stiffest or stoutest frame out there. You can feel a little bit of frame flex. So we're going to do this comparison. We're going to bring up some key points and talk about how each bike does with that key. First one we're going to talk about is just climbing efficiency. You know, how fast can these things go uphill on smooth terrain? So starting with the Mojo, from a pure efficiency standpoint, it is faster. There's no way around it. It is faster than the 5010. There's less pedal bob. The body position feels a little more centered up between the wheels, and the bike just accelerates and moves forward so quickly. You just can't beat it. The Mojo feels very lively, very energetic. It kind of just encourages you to pedal harder, stand up, sprint. Now we're going to jump into the 5010, and while it feels bigger on the downhill, it also feels that way on the uphill. And it climbs a lot more like a regular everyday all-mountain bike. It doesn't have that really lively, energetic climb feel to it. It feels more like you would just sit and spin your way to the top. You're not going to break any land speed records, but you're also going to get there just fine. That said, most of Santa Cruz's bikes feel that way, but I do think the 5010 is probably a hair more efficient than most of their other bikes. I think it climbs a little bit better. Technical climbing on the Mojo 4 is super fun, mostly because the bike has that lively, energetic feel. It just leaves you with a lot more energy to try to take tough lines, to go up and over a rock instead of maybe around it, to stand up and kind of power your way over a ledge or something. So it has a couple of things going for it. One is that lively, energetic feel. The other is Ibis's traction tune, which keeps the wheel on the ground very well. So you do have a ton of traction for kind of loose, technical climbing. You could argue that the reach and wheelbase on the Mojo are long, and you'd be right. So when you come to tight switchbacks, it is not quite as easy to navigate as the 5010. So technical climbing on the 5010 is pretty remarkable. You can't really find a flaw with the Mojo, but then you go ride the 5010 and it's better. I think there's more traction. The suspension's a little more active, so it just helps smooth out the trail just a little bit more for that technical climbing. Plus, the wheelbase and reach are just a hair shorter, so it helps you kind of pick your way through rocks and around tight corners. While it's not as energetic and lively and efficient as the Mojo, that's not everything when it comes to technical climbing. Sometimes traction and a more active rear suspension platform will help you in technical climbs more than pure efficiency. And lastly, for uphill performance, we have weight, and this one's not even a contest. The Mojo is lighter. So now we're getting to the fun stuff, downhill. We're going to break this down into handling, capability, and fun factor. All right, so you're going to need to use your imagination. Pretend you're riding a 130 mil travel bike. You're riding a kind of smooth, flowy trail with a lot of tight corners and berms, some jumps. The Mojo is going to feel more like the bike you just pictured than the 5010. The Mojo rides quicker. Even though the wheelbase is longer, it feels a little quicker around a corner. It jumps off of little things with more energy. It rides like that quick, snappy trail bike you probably just imagined. While the 5010 rides bigger than that. Picture that same trail bike, but now picture you're riding in really rocky terrain and the bike's just eating it all up. And that's more how the 5010 rides. It's still quick around a corner. It's got small wheels and good geometry for cornering and kind of playing around on the trail, but this one feels a lot more stout. I think it prefers fast straightaways, bumpy sections of trail, bumpy corners, things like that, more than it wants smooth, really tight terrain. All right, when it comes to all-out capability, the Mojo isn't quite as stiff or stout or burly as the 5010. I think the Mojo is lighter and feels that way and feels a little more flexy, and it just feels like the 130 mil travel bike that it is. That's not to say the Mojo won't handle most of your riding. It's just you're not going to be monster trucking World Cup rock gardens at race pace on this bike. The 5010 rides well above its pay grade when it comes to downhill capability. It feels like a much bigger, burlier bike than 130 mil travel. I kept forgetting that I was on a short travel bike when I was riding this one. It rides a lot more like an all-mountain bike. I never felt like the 5010 was the limiting factor. I never felt like it was going to hold me back on some steep, rocky, nasty terrain. I think it all comes down to that VPP suspension. It sits a little bit deeper into the travel where it's kind of in that active mid-stroke. It feels very plush, and then it ramps up really, really well at the end. So you're not experiencing bottom outs, harsh clangs, or anything. And the bike handles bigger hits really well, I think, because it's pretty progressive and ramps up a lot at the end. And lastly, now we're going to talk about the fun factor. In the traditional sense of the word, I think the Mojo is more fitting. It jumps off rollers better. It finds little side hits better. I think it hits tight corners better. So in the traditional sense of fun bike, I think the Mojo is probably more what you're thinking. I think the 5010 is fun in the sense of holding it open, going a little bit faster, riding gnarlier, rockier, meaner terrain. It just charges that much harder than the Mojo. So I think if I was at the bike park, I think the 5010 would be more fun. I think it's going to handle those high speed, bigger jumps better. It's going to handle bike park style features and terrain better. Now just a really quick shootout, just kind of covering everything. Climbing, Mojo takes the win. Downhill capability, 5010 takes the win. Downhill fun factor, it's got to be the Mojo. And the most versatile bike, kind of depends. If you're more of a downhill focused or bike park kind of person, the 5010 is going to be a little more versatile because it can ride harder terrain. I think if you're a little more XC or backcountry rides or big days in the mountains, I think the Mojo's a little more versatile just because it climbs better. All right, so which one is best for you? I'm just going to break this down into two different types of riders. Rider A, you like big days in the mountains. You don't race, but you hate being slow on climbs. You're not super concerned about being the fastest from point A to point B. You turn every roller into a jump. You look for every side hit. You love smacking berms. Some days you just want to take it easy and cruise some blue trails. You listen to audiobooks when you ride. You take pride in how fast you can get around an awkward corner. If you're that rider, get the Mojo 4. If you're a hard charger on the downhills, but you don't always ride terrain that requires a 160 mil travel bike, if you like jumps, if you like big jumps, if you like bike park, if you hate the feeling of being under-biked, if you have a season pass to a bike park, if you would rather just take in the scenery and not push the pace on a climb. If you listen to music while you ride, get the 5010. It's going to suit your style a lot better. We have both of these bikes in demo. If you want to come check one out, be sure to check out the link below for $20 off a demo bike. And thanks for sticking around. We'll see you next time.